All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Commando Cast Live. I wanted to give a couple seconds for everybody to pop in, make sure I had everything ready to go. The way this is going to work is I'm just going to do a Commando Cast, but we're going to do it live. Welcome. I am Andrew, obviously, and welcome to the Commando Cast Live for the first time. We'll see how this goes. So, what we're going to do today, earlier today, when we woke up this morning, we had a balance update from the Renewed Hope crew, not just for Faltering Allegiances, but for everything in the ARH standard format. So what I wanted to do today was go through some really cool stuff in this and kind of give my reactions, thoughts, very much excitement about a lot of this, and go from there. All right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining me today. So, the article specifically that I'm talking about today is from, again, Star Wars Destiny Renewed Hope. You check them out at swd@renewedhope.com. And what you can see, obviously, is you should be able to see me live as I go through this. So we're going to go ahead and click on this article for the balance update. So, hi everyone, we're back with another balance update. Can't believe it's been over a month since the set was released. I do have to be honest, it feels longer. It feels like a lot of the excitement for this is really dropping fast. I mean, that may be just my personal feelings on it, but I think this one kind of got figured out early. I don't know if that's because such a large percentage of the competitive base, if you will, is involved in the testing and stuff and kind of already had a shot at this. I honestly don't know, but it does feel like this kind of got figured out and pseudo stagnant pretty quick. So hopefully with all this we'll get some changes. So all right, there we go. All right, so let's start by revisiting. They open up by revisiting their previous watch list, which they talked about before. So United We Stand is a big one on here, and this is not possibly, it's almost certainly the biggest news of the day, of the update. So United We Stand, let me get that popped up. Oh, I thought I had that ready to go, but it looks like maybe it didn't work on me. So give me just a second, we'll get it figured out. There we go. All right. So United We Stand, obviously, I think we all know this plot by now, right? But I actually, it's interesting because I did a cast on this, I think it was last Friday, and this card's just become ubiquitous. And to be clear, it's actually not the We Stand part of this. It's actually the United part of this. I mean, if you have the point laying around, you go ahead and you play it Elite. But there's not very many games I've seen where you actually, like, I think I've only seen We Stand maybe happen like once, and it was certainly not in like a real game, right? So really this plot is just all about getting the free die rolled back in. So I put in my piece last week about it and how I thought something needed done. I didn't really know what it was. Could have done a point balance. I don't really think that was the right thing to do. So what they've decided to do was ban it, actually. So given its current meta dominance and low deck building costs, we felt like it was the correct time to do something about the card. While there was a desire for an errata, we feared that it, being an errata, could invite confusion to errata FFG printed cards at this stage. Therefore, we've decided to ban United We Stand. Like, whoa, okay. We will reapproach the card later with a more nuanced errata once we know FFG is officially done with supporting the game, as to avoid player confusion. So this is a very interesting statement, right? And I would be very curious, for those of you, so I see several of the DC guys on the chat, I'd be curious, we're live, let's have the conversation, right? But Whether or not you agree with the decision itself, I think it's very interesting that the decision was made partly because they didn't want to mess with the FFG part of it. And if we're taking this approach where we're waiting for the day that FFG, so to be clear, I actually understand the logic. They don't want to go back and change the card. However, to make any sort of statement like, well, things will be okay once FFG disengages, like, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Like, FFG's never, like, I think FFG's just done with us, but we're never going to hear anybody say FFG's done. Like, they're never going to make an article that says, okay, guys, we're officially done. Like, it's never going to happen, right? So, I don't know that that argument necessarily fits. I think that what's been done with United We Stand, I think is perfectly fine. I think something needed to happen, and I don't. Yeah, how much longer do we walk on eggshells? Yeah, exactly, right? So, James has it exactly right. It's like, if we're just going to sit around and like try and tiptoe around FFG, like for how long? Like when? I mean, like it's very clear that COVID is going to happen, right? So I guess that's one of the arguments is that COVID is keeping FFG in the game, and then they're going to have this Worlds maybe one day, and then they'll be done, right? And I mean, COVID's going to keep going for a long time, and I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get hung up on that one part of it, but yeah. So, all right. So next, moving on. So R2D2. So R2D2, our buddy here. It's droids. I mean, it's not R2D2. R2D2's actually been really great. He's actually, I think R2D2 may have actually been the best one of the three in terms of his kind of usefulness in other decks, right? So, yeah, so James says COVID doesn't stop you writing an article. Well, it's not that they can't write an article. It's that if, right, they wouldn't want to come out and say they're done if there's any hope of them ever actually having a Worlds, right? But I mean, my point is they won't hold a Worlds until COVID's done. COVID's going to go forever, and then how far down the line? So I think we're all aligned. It's just, the nitty gritty details of it. But back to droids, I think R2D2 has actually been the best droid of them all. Right? He was in that big Obi deck for a while. He play him with a lot of other people, and he's really cool, right? So I think that what they're doing here, specifically with R2D2, well, not specifically with R2D2, but with the droids, is really cool. So let's go ahead, and for this one, we'll skip ahead and we'll come back because Vibrosword actually makes a pop-up later. So they are finally doing what I think we've all hoped was going to happen for a long time. And again, a lot of that had to do with FFG tapping out or being done or whatever. So the restricted list, as we previously knew it, the horrible, it just didn't work. They're finally moving off of it. They're going closer to something like I was using for the Dice Commando Infinite Holocron. And they're just doing restricted pairings. So R2 and C-3PO were on there. Chopper and Abandoned Refinery are on there. Trando and Face the Enemy are on there. And no Answering Resistance Ring are on there. And that's it so far. This is huge. So anyway, that's the point with R2 and C-3PO is they finally, and ironically, Fateful Companions probably doesn't need killed anymore. I mean, it does, but it was on there with C-3PO and all this stuff, and putting those guys on there really kills it. But there's a lot of exciting stuff here, so let me go up and finish kind of the statement with Vibrosword. And we'll come down and talk restricted list, because I think that's probably the biggest, well, between the ban and the restricted list, I think more impactful is definitely the restricted list. And then Vibrosword. So Vibrosword is, looks like it's going to reset every time honest I close it. But Vibrosword, this card's crazy. It's just too good. I'm surprised that they mentioned that it's on there, but they're not really doing anything with it. They're going to keep watching it. This card's just too good. It is, right? Maybe they do some sort of fix where it's damage only. I still think it's too good in this removal format. We'll have to see what it looks like going forward. But this one, I don't know. I don't know about this one. So, all right. Now, let's talk restricted list, and I'll pop over back to the stream chat. I love that they're finally doing this with the restricted list. And I mean, one of the first things that popped in my mind this morning, for example, is that bad droids, right? K2SO, R2D2, and Chopper, we can now play bad droids again, right? Stuff like that. Bad droids was not a problem. There were no issues with it, but it got killed as collateral damage for decks that otherwise had a problem. And doing the restricted list, really helps to pair. I mean, it's not going to be 100%, nothing will be, but it's a heck of a lot better than putting one card on the list and getting like a ton of collateral damage. So this is fantastic. Now, you can make the arguments that maybe there should be some more stuff on here or not. I don't remember whether it was in the live chat or one of the discords, but Wyatt brought up that Droids Day Out is actually playable again now, which you can do exactly with like bad droids. So I'm definitely putting a bad droids list together. That will likely be the deck tech for this week because I'm so very excited about bad droids being playable again. The other thing is, and I see that popping up in the chat, right? The Trandoshan can now be played with DM again, Desperate Measures, which in of itself is very interesting. I mean, I don't think we have a hugely support-heavy meta, but I think having that in place to check Mega Blasters, specifically with Commando Cloning Facility, or even having it just to check Commando Cloning Facility. Now, does the Trandoshan need that? I don't know. I think Trandoshan definitely pops up more in this meta for sure going forward. I mean, tell me I'm crazy, but I think he becomes a lot better through all this. So the no answer resistance ring thing makes complete sense, even though I don't think that mill in its current form I don't think exists in a non-Jawa thing. I think Jawas are probably the way to go for mill right now. So I don't know the resistance ring no answer necessarily is the big deal. Alright, so now let's go into the watch list, which will probably be the bulk of this conversation in terms of debatable opinions and stuff like that. So for me, let's go through. So Closing In and Captured, of course, is the first one on this list. So Closing In, let's be very clear. I don't think there's anything actually wrong with Closing In. It just sucks to play against. And to reference an example, so Amy, my wife, and I actually got to. She doesn't play Destiny very often anymore, especially now that we have a kid. And like we got to play some casual Destiny last week. And I went through and I made my Boba Jango deck any means necessary instead of Closing In. The reason being that playing against Closing In is not fun, right? So does it mean, right? It's like the Order 6/6 argument. Order 6/6 is 66. It's fine as a card. It just sucks to play against, right? And there's really no reason that it has to exist. There's really no reason to me that it has to exist when the game's supposed to be fun, but I completely understand why as a competitive player it adds a layer of complexity that you may want to that you want to have or that you don't mind having or whatever it may be. So I want to be very clear. I don't think this card's broken. It's just no fun, and it's just no fun. So I agree that having this on the restricted list is the right thing to, not the restricted, having it on the watch list is the right thing to do. I personally think that they're just paying this lip service. I don't think they're ever going to do anything with this because I don't think they can justify doing anything with it from a competitive standpoint. So I think they're just putting it on to like maybe give somebody a bone. I don't think they're ever actually going to do anything with this card. Because I saw in the ARH Discord this morning, because I popped in to see what the reaction to this was, they were going back and forth on what does NPE mean, right? And that's always the argument, is like there's always the faction out there, and this tends to be the faction that screams the loudest, that thinks that NPE has to win everything, right? In order to be an NPE, you have to win or you have to dominate the format. And that's not the case. An NPE can also be the thing that if you play it against a new player, they leave the game, right? Or something like that. So I think that Closing In being on there is fine. All right, next one, and I don't need to pull this one up because it's actually just straight up there, is Force Affinity. So Force Affinity is, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think this is a really cool card. I don't think there's anything wrong with this card except for Terran, right? I mean, that's kind of what I think that's going to be a recurring theme here on a couple of these for me is that, you know, Force Affinity's only I think the only reason Force Affinity's on here is because of Terran. And you could even make the argument that Unending Hate, which is on here later, is only on the list because of Terran. And don't get me wrong, I have unending hate for Unending Hate, so don't, I get that in a second, but I don't necessarily know there's anything wrong with Force Affinity, so I think putting it on the watch list is fine, but I think they solve the Force Affinity problem if they do something about Terran, right? My current, I'm getting out of order, so. All right, next is Commando Cloning Facility. So Commando Cloning Facility is it's potentially really, really strong. I haven't actually seen this get abused very much. But the counter argument to that is that Commando Cloning Facility, one of the main primary reasons that people are playing Yellow Villain so much is because they're scared of Commando Cloning Facility, right? So I can see this one. But again, they're just putting it on the watch list. That's all they're doing is they're just talking about watching it. It's not like talking about fixing it or anything like that. So I don't know. I don't really know what this means. I would have to say, going into ARH release weekend, this is the card I think a lot of people were most scared of, and continues to push people into Yellow Villain. So I don't know, again, I think this is one of those cards that I don't know that I don't know that they can or will ever specifically do anything about it, because I think the existence of this card dictates part of the meta, but not in the way that would necessitate them doing anything about the card, right? Its existence is shifting the meta into a protective space away from this. So, and then you combine DM being Yellow Villain with the fact that you have Vibro Sword and that Pitar card, and all of a sudden we have a very heavily favored, it's very hard for me to go build a deck that's not Yellow Villain because of the reasons I just mentioned. So I completely understand them having it on here, but I don't think they're ever going to be able to do anything about it because it's not a direct problem. It's just causing ripple effect problems, if that makes sense. And I hope it does. So, and I mean, what they actually say is this card's incredibly potent. We realize it's pushed. And by removing UWS, United We Stand, from the meta, we're aware the strongest multi-die removal lies with red. Having no longer to be encumbered by trying to play around United, we foresee the possibility that this might take red decks highly desirable. And see, I actually disagree with that statement because I think that like I said, I think the presence of this card continues to push Yellow Villain as being preferred. But then again, you still have blue out there, right? So, yeah, I guess we'll see. All right, next is Terran. So could probably talk about, and I'd love the live stream watchers to pop up because I'm really fatigued of this guy. I think because of just him being too toolboxy, and I don't. I had an episode, I think, a couple weeks ago about this guy as well, which, of course, wasn't well received by the people that like to play him. But I think my point here is valid, and I don't necessarily know that Terran himself is a problem as a card himself. The problem is what Terran does to the meta, right? So we have this very interesting thing, and they're going through this almost piece by piece on their watch list, where it seems, at least to me, that their problem cards aren't problems, but it's the effects of the problem cards, right? And I realize that Terran and Vader are, one of the big beasts in the room, but if you look back at the last couple big quote-unquote tournaments that have happened in the last couple weeks, it's actually, Luke and Obi are actually dominating a lot of those big tournaments. And that's kind of, I think that's largely due to United We Stand. I think it's unfortunate that United We Stand, they lose that. But I don't know. I still think that Terran himself represents a lot of big potential problems for the future design space. And having, James nailed it, right? he shouldn't have an after you activate and a power action. That's crazy town to me. And then just what he can do with that Jedi keyword in a villain deck is really crazy, right? So Terran himself is causing the Force Affinity problem. I mean, again, I'll ask the question to the guys on the stream, right? Let's say Terran doesn't exist. Is Force Affinity, you still play it. Like, of course you would still play it with Ponkrell, right? Of course you would. But, like, is that as much of a problem, right? And Ponkrell's one more point and doesn't have all this other toolboxy stuff. So I think that having him on the watch list is the correct thing to do, but I also think it might be the wrong thing to do, because I think we already have the data, to have him do something that's beyond the watch list. So I guess that's why I'm kind of back and forth on this one, is like, I don't think he himself as an individual card is broken, but what he's doing to the meta, I think, is a big deal, and I don't see how putting him on the watch list after 4 weeks changes anything, right? Like, saying we're watching him, like, we should have been watching him 4 weeks ago, right? So my guess would be that putting him on the watch list is just trying to appease people, and it's not actually going to do anything until probably closer to the next set release, when they want to push whatever. I mean, that just seems like a tactic to me, to get him on there, say, all right, well, hey, we're watching him, it's cool, we're watching him, and then when they want to push something else, some other archetype, then they swing him in, they kill that, and then, it's basically like a switch, a loop-de-loop, whatever. All right, last one, and I do admittedly have unending hate for unending hate. And I think I said it before somewhere, I think it was in the Discord. I don't understand how the same individuals who passionately hated the, oh shoot, come on, how come of course I'm live and I can't remember the card name right. Oh, Feel Your Anger, right? How come it is that literally the same people who thought Feel Your Anger was a blowout card, right? So just a reminder, Feel Your Anger was a card from Awakenings, and it was, you remove dice equal to the number of blanks your opponent is showing. So if they were showing 3 blanks, you could remove 3 dice, and it did not have to be the blank dice. And yes, that was too powerful. Like, of course it was. We all know that. But I don't understand how it's because it's literally some of the same people. I remember them bitching about it back then, on how it was destroying design space and destroying the meta and really crushing removal and causing all sorts of not just in-game problems but out-of-game problems. I don't understand how the same people developed this card. Like this, and I get it, it's not a blowout, but it's a spike damage, and it just creates feel bads. And they do, in their credit, they do speak to that. And what they specifically says is, while this card as it stands does not show any competitive issues, we're adding it to the watch list for its NPE aspect. Again, what does NPE mean? I don't know, right? Well, I have an opinion, but everybody tends to disagree on that, right? So saying that you're adding it to the watch list for an NPE impact is interesting. This card has become ubiquitous in blue villain decks. Well, of course it has, because it's crazy good. And if you're the player who rolled those 3 blank dice, you might hate your life. We do not anticipate any short-term action on this card, but we'll still be monitoring it. I mean, isn't that kind of just a way of saying we're probably not going to do anything about it, right? I mean, again, I don't think the card itself, like, what are you going to do about the card itself? I mean, you can put a cap on it or something maybe, but it's never going to specifically show itself as a problem, because you have to have it. It's only a problem those 1 in 10 times when somebody rolls all blanks or something like that, right? So, we always make the argument here. That, well, not always, but we frequently make the argument for stuff to be broken that it has to be winning. I mean, that's consistently what we hear from the don't ban anything crowd or the whatever, right? So if you are, right, if this card in of itself isn't a problem per se, are you going to do anything about it? And like, I think that what they're using here, my personal feeling here is that a lot of their watch list cards are being put on here just to make people feel like their voices are being heard. But I don't think that a lot of the stuff on here they're ever going to do about it. So I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. So that is, and then of course, sorry. So Vibrosword, they're going to continue to watch Vibrosword, and I guess that's kind of my point here. Is like I think it's pretty clear by now. It's very clear to me that Vibrosword is bonkers, like bonkers good, and is in of itself keeping people into yellow. But to be fair, right, on what they said, if we go back up, they said weapon has certainly become a meta staple for every yellow deck, and we're continuing to watch a card. However, both hero and villain yellow decks are not overly dominating the meta, and we don't think any change is needed, right? So again, that's one of those things of like, well, it's an auto include, it's way above curve, it's pushing people towards these decks, but those decks aren't winning, so we're just going to keep watching it. And I guess that's fair, right? But again, I think it's, to me, it kind of fits into the meta ripple effects of like, I think everybody pretty much knows that this card is like too good. I mean, right? That's like, it's driving a lot of people to yellow just because of this card. I don't know. We'll see. So, yeah, I think so. That's it for the article. Now, let's go ahead and talk just on this stream. Let's talk United We Stand, right? Because that's, I mean, banning a card outright is a big deal. I mean, we saw our first ban ever on Fateful Companions. I mean, I think that was the right thing to do. Like, and I don't think that many people disagreed with that. Like, I think they had a lot of people on their side for that. But banning in of itself it's still a big deal. So Wyatt's asking, why do you think they won't do things? They just hit United after watching it last month. I mean, yeah. So I mean, that's a fair. Not sure where the suspicion comes from on only this second ever update. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And just to remind everybody, put it in context, Wyatt is a playtester, right? So might be taking some of that personally. I guess what I'm saying, Wyatt, is a lot of these cards on there, they're not specific. I mean, I think I've said it multiple times. They're not specific problems. The cards in themselves aren't specific problems. I mean, I think the Terran, like the Camino, I think is a really good example. Actually, the Camino might be the best example. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious when you look at Camino what the problem is. The only thing keeping Camino out is the other decks, right? I mean, in my opinion, right? That's what I'm here talking about. So right, Camino itself isn't a problem because Camino is not a problem, but it's pushing people towards other decks, which means it is a meta impact. So what's going to be their data to actually take Camino out or do anything about Camino? Like, will there be any data there for it? So, yeah. I was just saying that the benefit of the doubt is warranted here. Oh, I mean, of course. I mean, they're going out of their way to do this and take the action and speak to it. I mean, I think that in of itself is great. I just don't think that, like, this for like Force Affinity. Let's go back to that discussion, right? Force Affinity. Do we really think they're going to do anything about Force Affinity? Like, there's no. I mean, I don't think they'll ever do anything about Force Affinity because I think Force Affinity's problem is Terran, right? But I mean, maybe I could be wrong. I mean, you might have more info than me. So, but again, this is. I mean, I want to be clear. This is all just first. This is all just first reaction to me, or this is all just my first reaction. But there's a lot of stuff like the restricted list, fan freaking tastic. It's amazing. We needed it. As far as the watch list. I don't see, like, closing in. I don't see them ever do anything about closing in. I just don't see it, especially with it being an FFG card, right? And what kind of the discussion around FFG cards and all that already. I don't see them doing anything about closing in. I mean, we never did anything about Order 6/6 or whatever because of the same argument. So, all right. Anyway, so with that said, let me check the live stream here. Looks like they're just talking back and forth about why I'm wrong in playtesting, which is fine, which is completely fair. So the one of the watch list, the ones I'd like to see go here is Unending Hate. Like, I can't believe I don't understand this card ever having been. I don't understand Unending Hate ever having been made without a cap or in it. And again, I don't see Unending Hate getting. I mean, it should have. To me, it should have been pretty obvious what was going to happen with Unending Hate, right? To the people who made it. So if you went ahead and made it despite that, I think that you don't do anything with it. I think you just leave it on this watch list because, again, it's only going to come up one every few times. It's not going to drive the meta. It's not going to be driving people to win things. And I just don't see. I don't know what monitoring it means, I guess is what I'm saying. So, but again, there's a lot of really good. There's a lot of really majorly impactful stuff here. The restricted list thing is huge. It's massive. It means a lot for the future, and it's very exciting. And a lot of decks just became potentially playable here again. I mean, and not just Trandos. Trandos, I think Trandos were kind of a thing anyway, but they were being kept out. So I think we have a lot going there. So at this point, I've said my piece. I'll hang out for a couple extra minutes just to kind of clean up the live chat, and then we will get out of here because I think we're at like a half hour. Yes, right around a half hour. So unless there's anything else, like I said, I'll give everybody a couple minutes for questions, and then we'll get out of here today. Thank you, James, for popping in. That was awesome. Thanks, Wyatt. Hey, Todd. And yeah, I thought it might be fun just to, I was going to sit down and do a recording this morning with my reactions, and I thought it might be more fun to do it live, although, doing stuff live can also get you in more trouble, so we'll see how this is received. But all right, looks like that's it. So I wanted to. Oh, Andrew, I know you did the video on Terran, but why do you hate the after you activate on Terran so much? Is it a precedent thing? Primarily, yes, Joey. Right. So, it's like I said, I don't specifically think I do. So there's a lot of statements here. I do think that they need to do something about Terran. My main feeling is that I don't think he should be an 11-14. I think he should be a 12-14. And if somebody wants him to be 15, then I think he needs to be a 13-15. Him being a 2-point for what he brings to the table, or him being a 3-point die for what he brings to the table on a non-3-point die, I think is really too much. But yeah, I don't like that we're getting into this space where it feels like every card needs to do everything to be good. Like, it's okay to have a card that for one heals 2. It's okay to have a card that for one removes a character die if you spot whatever, or removes a non-character die if you meet whatever conditions. Like, that's good fundamental Destiny. And yes, maybe that means that we just start using reprints or something like that, which I think would be wise, versus trying to, create the 9th version of whatever. But Terran having... He just does too much. Like, if our 11-point character, non-elite, can do what he does, what does our future 23-point character look like? I guess that's more where my head is on all of this. Is Terran himself a problem? No, but like, let's think 3 sets down the line of the designers, right? Because when you're a designer, you want to make cool stuff. Like, nobody wants to go in and design the next field medic. Nobody wants to go in and design the next electroshock, because sometimes you just can't do it better anyway. And it's just, if we keep playing this one-upping, then aren't we just power creeping in its own different way? We're either power creeping or we're getting more toolboxy or whatever, and I think that's very risky for the future. Right? I mean, it's okay to use reprints. I mean, I would be perfectly fine if our 90-card set was using, half reprints or something like that, right? Like, I mean, we can pop into Magic the Gathering for a second. I mean, Magic's gotten very bad at doing multiple reprint, or they'll rename a card. Like Llanowar Elves is a good example. Like, just reprint Llanowar Elves instead of making a Llanowar Elves with a different name that's slightly different. I mean, unless there's a place for it, just use the card again. So he says, fair enough. My buddy and I were expecting Terran to be like Vader TTB. When we saw him come in under 15, we were surprised. Yeah, and I mean, if I don't know, if Terran had the same ability with different die and he was a 24 point character, would I feel the same way? I mean, you have a fair point there. I don't know that I would. Um, but still, if you look at, I mean, even go look at, and I'm not saying that just because FFG did it that ARH can't, right? But if you go look by and large at what characters do, most characters do one. I mean, they bring dice to the table and a health pool to the table, but they do something. And Terran does a bunch of things, and I just don't like the precedent that it sets. So that's my piece there. And David, well, I mean, we're still here, but we're on our way out, buddy. So, all right. Well, again, thank you everyone for joining me today, especially those that joined me live. Please, if you didn't catch us live, go ahead and join the conversation in the comments below. Nothing else, guys. Go Commando.